Hello, my name is Colleen Getty with The Room to Write, and we're here today with Sarah Reul, author of many a book, as well as an illustrator of all these books. So welcome, Sarah. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Colleen. I'm so excited to be here.
Good. We are too. And in an effort to begin to understand how all this awesome creativity happens, maybe if you can just sort of paint for us a picture of you, how you create, where, what your process is in terms of like location and
Sure.
what you do.
Yeah. So just like super brief background about me. I didn't always do this. I did nonprofit administration for a long time. I went back to school to study animation and got a master's degree. And then I realized that there weren't that many jobs in the area for animation. So I realized that a picture book, a really good picture book, is kind of like a short film. So that's sort of how I got into making picture books. And then I just started submitting books, and I write from my house. I have just a little studio it's really my little office that's in the corner of our bedroom. And then in the last year or two, I started renting a studio space at Follow Your Art in Melrose, just to have a place outside of my house where everybody else wasn't always there.
Right.
But I do most of my writing at home, at my desk, at the dining room table. Did that answer the question?
Yeah. So are there papers everywhere in your house? Or is everything sort of, like for people trying to figure out how are they getting their work done? Is it sort of just, because I say that because I have papers everywhere in my house, but are you pretty much concentrated in the one office area? And then when you go to your remote studio, how do you kind of organize your thoughts and all of that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I generally start on paper. I do a lot of work because I studied animation and I learned how to do hand-drawn animation on the computer. A lot of my illustrations are using Photoshop and the computer, but I always start with my sketches on paper. I feel like I can make them a lot messier and have a lot more thinking involved when I do it on paper. I don't know if you want me to show this. I just, this is sort of what, I have a book that's coming out in October, and this is what a lot of the paperwork looked like as I was working on it. So I'll start out with some really rough sketches, and then I'll sort of scan them, and then this is just sort of like an example of, like a storyboard kind of, like a map, and I'll do it on paper, I'll scan it in, I'll redraw it, I'll print it out. And so I try to keep most of my stuff in a folder. I'll also I'll print everything out, and then I'll draw these teeny tiny thumbnail drawings. They call them thumbnails because they're just really small. You just want to get sort of like an idea of the general stuff that you want to have in the picture. Not worry about the the eyelashes and all the details. You just want to get like that map.
Right.
So that's what I do. And then I try to have a folder for each project I'm working on, so that when I'm done for the day, I can stick it all in, because I do tend to spill my coffee pretty frequently. And at home we have cats and a dog who likes to eat paper. So I like to be messy when I'm working, but I have to clean up at home because of where I live.
Right. And so looking at those pages, what comes first, the words or the pictures, or do they sort of just come together?
Yeah, usually it's, trying to think, I think I maybe sent a file that has just like a whole bunch of scribbling. So I'll kind of have some kind of an idea. I'll scribble down a whole bunch of words, maybe like a list of words that has to do with it. I don't feel like it has to be a whole story when I'm first writing it down. I just sort of grab all the things that have to do with that idea, and I get them on paper, whether they come out as like a really messy scribble. I don't know if I have any in here from this book.
And this book is Bubbie and Rivka's best Challah ever.
Yeah.
Now, right?
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Bubbie and Rivka's best ever Challah so far. This is, and it's coming out from Abrams in October. So this was an early version of the cover sketch. And I hand lettered all the letters. So actually this isn't what final cover look like? I'm realizing now it looks different.
Which is a great example of you don't always end where you started, right?
Yeah, but it's similar. There's similar elements, and you kind of, pick and choose, and that way you have a lot of choices. If you make a big mess and you have a bunch of little messy options, then you can say, all right, this one's a good fit, or this one's maybe better for a different book. Not.
Right. Goes into a different folder.
Right.
So you're corralling all these things together. Are you switching them around like whole pages, or because you're predominantly a picture book writer and illustrator.
Yeah.
So does it do you already, when it comes to the spark of the idea and then the end product, does it unfold usually in the same order, or are you really switching the whole story around a lot throughout the process?
Definitely switching it around a lot throughout the process. I have a couple critique groups that I'm a part of. Actually, Rivka, who you've interviewed,
right, yeah.
is one of my critique partners, my writing critique partner. And so I'll bring early versions of things and I'll share them with other writers or other illustrators to get ideas on maybe how to make the concepts come across more clearly. Mm-hmm. So I would say I definitely show the words first, and I try to break it down into the format of a picture book. Just chunk it out. A picture book is usually about 32 pages, okay. Which can be, depending on whether you're including the end pages. I'll just use this as an example in case people don't know what, so an end page, this says Post-it notes. Everything I have has Post-it notes all over it, but the end pages are the parts that are glued down. And then, so sometimes those are included in the final page count, and sometimes they're not, depending on your publisher. So, yeah, okay. I lost the track of that question, but.
No, that's good. So you're putting everything together, you bring it to your critique group. They're telling you, okay, maybe this would work better over here or there, which is always an important lesson for our audience, is that, things are messy. And we were talking about that a little earlier, especially when you're going to school visits. Maybe you want to talk a little bit about school visits, but also how you talk about the process of writing, and not to think, don't be paralyzed at that first sentence, because it probably won't be the first sentence later on.
Right. Yeah, I think, sometimes people are, even if you're just writing for yourself, it feels almost like a performance, like you want this to be so good and you want it to be perfect, and like you're thinking about all the awards that you'll win, for this sentence. And then, if you can get stuck in this place where you can't make anything else because what you put down next is not perfect. For me, it's never perfect when I put it down. And so I try to start really rough, really messy sketches, a bunch of words that are just like a list. It's not a story, but it's words that I might use, or words that might help me get more ideas, find out more what I want the story to be. And then I sort of redo it a bunch of different times. And each time I start a new project, I kind of forget what the process is, and I have to sort of reinvent it or look at my old folders and try to figure out how I've done it in the past, and whether I want to do it the same way or whether I need to use a different technique. Right.
So are you a pantser or a planner, I guess, do you usually have it pretty structured out? It sounds like almost you're a hybrid of the two.
I think it's definitely a hybrid, yeah, because I feel like I need to, especially at the beginning, I need to let it get random enough that it can be what it's going to be, rather than what I think it's going to be. Sometimes I'll sit down to write a book and I think it's about one concept, and then later I realize it's about something else. And there was an author, oh my goodness, now I can't remember who it was. I want to say it was Kate Messner, who said that a really good story, especially a really good picture book, you should be able to have an about phrase. So she says, this book is about a kid who drops their ice cream cone, but underneath that, it's about, learning to deal with things you can't control, or something like that. So, so I feel like in that way, if you can have an about phrase, I personally have never had it at the beginning of writing the process, but I sort of figure that out as I'm going, and I sort of find out as I'm going what that is. And then if you can have those two layers in a story, then it can have some interest for the adult who's reading it.
like a metaphor.
Yeah.
No, that's really interesting, and I would imagine it's more interesting for the author too, because then there's sort of this other layer you can tap into.
Yeah, absolutely. I think sometimes people think of picture books as just being like really simple, and sometimes they are, and sometimes they, some picture books don't have those extra layers of meaning, which personally I find I have trouble rereading them as many times as my children want me to. But I think if I can find something that I'm really interested in and find a way to get that into the book, then hopefully that comes through in the finished product.
Right. And so now we're talking about not just the writing, but you also have that layer of illustration that you can do with that. So maybe talk a little bit about how you're able to put that second about maybe into the illustrations that may not necessarily come into the words, but if you look at the illustrations, does
yeah a lot of times sometimes you don't want the illustrations to say exactly what the words are saying. You want it to either add to the words, or you want it to almost sometimes contrast. So if you're like, they couldn't find the dog anywhere, and then the dog's like peeking out behind the chair or something, like so that the kid reading the book can know more than what the characters know in the book. So you sort of have to figure out for each spread, like the 2 pages together in a picture book, what you're going for.
Okay.
Whether it's adding more information, adding more emotion, adding other details that upon a second or third read, a child might find in the illustrations. Because a lot of times with picture books, the kids who are reading them maybe aren't capable of reading the words on their own. So maybe they'll have an adult who will read the book to them sometimes, but then other times they'll just have to picture walk through the books, which was a concept that my younger daughter's kindergarten teacher introduced me to. And I was like, right, like I remember doing that as a kid, like going through and retelling myself the story, sort of,
and I love
just by
that
looking
term,
at the
picture walk.
Yeah, right.
That's awesome. So have you ever found that, like, now you're going to your critique group, is your critique group for the words only, or how are you critiquing also your illustrations, or do they do both?
Yeah, so I was part of a wonderful illustration critique group. During the pandemic, during the main part of the pandemic, we were meeting via Zoom, and after a while I just got a little zoomed out, so I'm taking a break from that group now. But I was with them for years, and we would bring either one illustration or a whole book dummy, which is like the really rough version early on. And so people could say, oh, I don't really understand what's happening over here. Can you explain that more? And sometimes when people ask a lot of questions, they can help you realize what you need to elaborate more on, or you need to clarify, or you need to, either of those things.
And so those people were all illustrators as well?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, a mix of people who were published and who were not yet published, and some people had whole book dummies and were writing stories as well. But we really were trying to focus on critiquing just illustrations, and other people who were really just interested in illustrating for other people or illustrating other children's literature related things.
So any particular things that maybe you can tell viewers like to watch out for when you're trying to pair illustrations with the text, or things that you learned along the way in terms of the illustration component, because you do both for your books. So
yeah, I think doing multiple drafts of something and experimenting with the emotions that the characters are showing, I think is a really important element. Since I was studying animation, like I feel like one of the things about hand-drawn animation, like traditional, like that old-fashioned Disney animation type of thing, is there's 12 principles of animation, and one that really carries over to picture books is exaggeration and just really pushing. So if somebody is sad, like you could draw them like this, right? But like, can you draw them, really, really sad and hunched over? And like, how does that? That's not my microphone. but like, how does that? Really affect, like if you push it, sometimes you push it too far, you can always come back, right? But like if you push it and you make it more of what it is, I think you can. Sometimes people tend to draw things and they're a little bit reserved about the way that the emotion's coming through, or a little bit reserved about the posture, like everybody's standing up straight. And like whenever I'm around a bunch of people, like I don't feel like we're all standing up straight, we're all kind of slouching off to the side, or so just sort of experimenting with pushing things a little bit further and doing multiple versions of things. So you don't have to worry about, sometimes I got the hands perfect on this one, I don't want to redraw it. But if you just keep drawing it over and over again, like, you're the person who drew those, you'll draw nice hands again. It's okay.
I like that.
Yeah.
You got to remind yourself you actually did do that already, so you can improve upon it.
Yeah.
So in terms of, like, are you scanning something into your computer and putting it on the computer and then able to maybe just take the face out in practice, or are you redrawing the whole thing, including the expressions and the emotion?
Yeah, I redraw the whole thing over and over again. So if I can find, try to separate this stuff out before. But sometimes what I'll do is just redraw a whole bunch of versions. So this is actually this is an example of something where I did do what you just said. I had, this is kind of an animator trick thing where you draw a model sheet. So, and this is actually not a character. This is a character that I designed for the Bubbie and Rivka book to be the grandmother, but I actually did a different design. I ended up with a different one, but I basically scanned in a pencil drawing, and then I sort of erased out half of the face so that I could draw different expressions, like a happy expression, and do it from the side too, so that I sort of would be able to then. So this, this of course, something like this would never end up in the final book, but it would be used as a reference for that, so that I would know, okay, like from the side, this is what she looks like.
Right.
And yeah, I mean, I used to try to just, sometimes if there's a little thing, I can just readjust it. I use Photoshop, which works in layers. So it's kind of like if anybody's used Procreate on the iPad, it works in a similar way, that it's almost like these transparent layers stacked up on top of each other that you can turn on or off.
Okay.
And so that way you can redraw things if you want to. But I find if you're just fussing over one little bit, just redraw the whole thing, because
and now your background is animation, right? So, I mean, that probably is part of your process anyways, because animation lends itself to constantly drawing each, especially if you're talking old school like Disney, every little tiny step. So I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, I think doing the, I went back to school because I just missed, I hadn't drawn for a long time as an adult, and I wanted to develop those skills, and I thought animation would be a really good way to get over my fear of making a perfect drawing, because in traditional animation, you've got 24 frames per second, and you have to have at least 12 drawings per second of animation.
Gosh.
So, so it's, and you have to be consistent about it, because if you draw the head, larger from one frame to the next, it'll look like the person's head's going boo, 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 like that, right? So you have to draw over and over again, and you have to keep the volumes the same, and you have to stay on model. Like you have to, you can't, make the eyeballs a different shape in one, you can't, unless that's the effect that you're going for, like one of those like takes where like the eyeballs are popping out or something. But like you have to know what you're looking for. And I think that, in the process, the thesis film that I made for my master's degree was about our lake here in town in Wakefield.
Yes, and if our audience hasn't seen it, check it out. It's on WCAT. I'm sure it's on your website.
Yep.
Ruler.com, right?
Yep. REULER.com. Yeah,
awesome.
and and the film it's only 3.5 minutes long, and it took me 8,000 years to make. No, it took me probably a year and a half of working on it part-time to make a 3.5 minute film, and it's called The Search for the Monster of Lake Quannapowitt. So it's silly. It's not scary.
I loved it. It's awesome. So for 3.5 minutes, do you know how many drawings that actually equals to, or?
It's like thousands of drawings.
Really?
And also because you have to do separate background drawings sometimes. Sometimes a lot of times you can reuse the backgrounds in the same scene. You wouldn't redraw the background over and over again. You can hold that as a frame, as a cell sort of behind it, behind the drawings that are moving. But it was thousands of drawings. Plus, if you think about, these kinds of drawings, which were really the more thinking drawings, it's a lot. There's a famous animator whose first name is Chuck, and I'm forgetting his last name, who did like the Roadrunner cartoons. And he has a famous quote. It's like, everybody has, I'm totally paraphrasing, but it's like everybody has, 10,000 bad drawings in them. And so you have to get those out before you can So you might as well start now
So
if
I
you're going to get
still have
them.
900.
Yeah. Well,
9,000.
Yeah. I guess my feeling is though, like I don't like to think of them as bad drawings. I don't like to think of any drawings as bad drawings because like a lot of them are stepping stones, or a lot of them are. Sometimes drawing is just good to get your brain to a place where you want it to be, and it isn't about showing that picture to somebody and them going, "Wow, you drew such and such." It's more maybe about you and your process and
Right.
your brain.
And I'm even just thinking of being in, class somewhere, even high school, college, any class, and doodling as sort of a way to even just keep your mind active. Do you find that sometimes when you're doing your animations or your illustrations, it's actually even generating the text for your books while you're doing it? Like, is it opening up your ideas more because you're...
Yeah, sometimes, like doodles and stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if my doodles really lead anywhere. Like a lot of my doodles are kind of like this kind of thing, like a lot of like lines and stuff. I mean, yeah, I'm not even kidding. It's like there's a lot of it. But I think there's a cartoonist whose name is Linda with a Y, and she has these great, she actually won a MacArthur Genius Grant. Like she has this great couple books about the process of drawing and like what drawing gives to you and what an image is, these kind of conceptual things. And her books are all very like it's a mix of like collages and semi-autobiographical comics.
Right.
But one of the things she talks about is she uses the term moodles, and sometimes like drawing doodles or drawing something, it's like a really good way to stay where you are, like to be where you, so sometimes like it's very hard to sit through something like a very boring class or something like that, and the doodles can help you, moodles or doodles, whatever, can help you stay. And sometimes, so when I'm on the phone, I have a lot of trouble. I'm talking with my hands a lot. I have a lot of trouble staying still.
You need to be doodling right now.
Yeah, and so when I'm on the phone, a lot of times I like to have stage business. Like I'm doodling or something, and it doesn't necessarily go anywhere, but I think it's good for my brain. I can show you, and these are actually, I was keeping, she has a lot of ideas for different journal formats. And so like, this is like her 7-minute journal format where like you sort of just write down 7 things that you did that day, 7 things you saw, and then maybe 1 thing you heard, and then you draw one of those things on the next page.
Wow.
So she has these different formats, and so this was from August and September of 2020. And there's some, like you can, and then sometimes I would just draw, these are all like her exercises.
Right.
So just draw what I did that day, maybe just jot down a line. So maybe draw 4 different things I did that day. Look, I did a drawing of myself drawing some plants. Where like,
awesome.
Oh, I was rolling up an air mattress.
My drawings would not look that good.
But if it was something that you practiced and you did, and you wouldn't, like when I was drawing them, I didn't worry whether they were good or not. These are not all.
And actually, that reminds me, I did try to do some drawing, something like that. It wasn't Linda Barry, but I was trying to force myself to do something different than just write.
Yeah.
And maybe that's part of what you're saying is even just, and I forget who had said this recently, but just stretch your creativity in all different ways, and it will help your creativity across the board.
Yeah. I think it's really good practice for like trying to be nice to yourself and the things that you make, because I think a lot of grown-ups that I know, kind of stopped drawing when they were like 9 or 10. Like I personally didn't have a lot of drawing instruction when I was in school. I grew up in New York. I went to public schools, and like that just wasn't something that was funded. Or even if I had art classes, they weren't really about like drawing representationally or anything. So I didn't draw for a long time, and I liked drawing, but I was afraid it wouldn't be good enough, right? Yeah. And so many adults come up to me and go, I couldn't draw a stick figure. And I feel bad because it's this internalized way of thinking about what drawing has to be. And I feel like if you have the capability of drawing, the 26 letters of the alphabet, like you're drawing those shapes, and you're drawing them in a way that's recognizable and communicates to other people if you have somewhat readable handwriting, right? And so if you have the capability to do that, I think you have the capability to draw. It might not look like someone else's work, but that's not the point. Like, I think people can, it's just that a lot of people stop and are afraid to do it again because and that's a lot of, Lynne Reul talks a lot about that stuff too. Yeah.
Right. You're one of the fourth people to talk about her. And
oh, really?
When we did our Brightview senior bookmaking, the woman that led it used her techniques.
Yeah.
So definitely for our audience, look her up.
She's great. Yeah.
So just because there's never enough time, right? But I do want to focus on Bubbie and Rivka, and sort of part of the point of the show is not only to get to know the process, but also to actually see that whole arc of, I know you were talking about you're on submission for something else. This one has been accepted. It's going to be published this
in
fall?
October.
Okay. So I don't know. I'm going to let you go with either one of those topics if you want to kind of show us the whole arc of Bubbie and Rivka, or if you want to talk a little bit about now you have something that's going to be published, but you're still going on submission for other things.
Right. Well, if you're trying to make a living from this line of work, which is difficult because it's not like a salaried job, you're sort of, I have an agent who helps me send my books out to different publishers, and then the publishers most of the time they say, no, thank you, this isn't a good fit for our list. We already have a book with a cat as the main character. There's 1,000 reasons why it's not a good fit, even if that person personally likes it. So my agent helps me send books that are in progress out, that are at the dummy phase where they look kind of like rough drawings. Maybe there's 1 or 2 finished illustrations. They sort of look like this early version like we had. The pictures are messy. They're clear enough to sort of understand what's going on. She sends them as PDFs. And so if you want to have a pipeline of, future books that are published, you have to have books that are out on submission. So that's sort of what I've been doing. In the meantime, the finished artwork for this book, for Bubbie and Rivka's Best Ever Challah So Far, was submitted to the publisher last October. And then they take a whole year in between that being, all the files being totally set, and the book being like a printed book that's available in bookstores and libraries. So during that time, I'm always trying to write new things, bring them to my critique groups, bringing them to the point where they're communicating enough that they can be shared with publishers, and then sending them out to publishers to see whether an editor will fall in love with them.
Right.
And whether they can convince their whole marketing team to take the book on.
Right.
So it's
and I mean, when you say making a living out of this, I guess it's helpful for the audience to know it's not just the writer or the illustrator trying to make a living, it's also the people that are publishing it. And that's where it gets to, okay, it might be something they love, but they don't think it will make the money it needs to make. So.
Right. The marketing team has to, a lot of times books are too quiet. They don't think they can sell them. Or they already have a book on their backlist, a book that they've already published that has some similar theme, even if it's totally not the same story. It's close enough that their marketing team's going to have difficulty marketing it to bookstores and libraries. So, there's a lot of wonderful picture books, as you know, a lot of wonderful books out there. And so it's just keep making things and
you do you, and then eventually it will find its way, right?
Hopefully. That's ideally, knock on wood.
When we're just going to wrap this up, even though there's hours long that we could keep going, but maybe if you want to think of something that would be a great piece of advice or something that helps to center you or keep you going to tell our audience, then go for it.
Yeah, just sort of like what we were talking about before, just when you sit down to try to create something, you don't have to worry whether it's good or not. You can just keep going. Just keep making more things. You can always revisit. I find that certain book ideas or concepts will keep floating up in my notebooks or in my sketchbooks. And, something that I thought of 5 years ago, I go, I have this great new idea. And then I look through my sketchbooks and I had that idea 5 years ago. So it'll come back, and you can make it better a little bit at a time, if that's what you want to do. Keep working on it.
Right. Good. All right. Well, thanks so much, Sarah, for coming in here. And
thank you for having
honestly,
me.
It's been so interesting. And if anybody else would like to join us in the seat where Sarah's sitting right now, any other authors, feel free to contact me at Colleen@theroomtowrite.org or go to our website. And happy writing.
Thanks so much.